Hey, I'm Vicky. I'm also known as Skittles. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a lecturer in dance here at the place. My practice background is focused on street dance and hip-hop related dance forms, and I'm from East London. I think it's been important to introduce hip-hop related dance forms and street dance into the school because I think those skills have always been valuable, but I think they're just being more widely considered as essential as the industry is changing. If I think about actually the representation I saw of hip-hop and street dance, when I was a kid, it was mostly like backing dancing, so music videos, maybe commercials. So some of the jobs I've actually done, I couldn't have imagined or seen myself doing in terms of like having street dance movies and things like that, which I think is very different in the UK than America because they've had a bit more, I suppose, exposure in the industry in terms of they've got a movie called Breaking that came out in the 80s and Wild Style that came out in the 80s, and then moving further forward, there's Save the Last Dance, Honey, B2K, You've Got Served, which I suppose there's a lot of exposure to those kind of dance styles in loads of different contexts. Whereas here, I'm actually not sure if it was the first one, but I worked on a movie called Street Dance 3D, that was in 2010, and I think that might have been the first movie, maybe in the UK, that focused on street dance and hip hop. So I feel like it's kind of expanding a bit more, like the context that you see it in. Theatre as well, hip hop theatre was pioneered here. Although these dances come from America, hip hop theatre was pioneered here, so it's another setting, I suppose, that it wasn't seen in earlier days. So I think that's part of why these skills, although they've always been valuable, are now being more widely considered as essential when we're looking at like young artists coming into the industry. I think it's also important to note that more recently there's been a wider call for diversity, which I think is a bit of a double-edged sword because it can be considered to be reactionary to respond to that, but also it can be a part of impacting change, decolonising and dismantling practice hierarchy. Also, being a part of an institution that is inclusive of hip-hop related dance forms and street dance is important to me because I didn't study dance in higher education. When I was at the age of going into like university, there weren't any higher education institutions that were inclusive of street dance and hip-hop. Of course, there are other dance styles that are useful, but I knew that that was the kind of dance I wanted to do, and so I think I would have struggled being in an institution that didn't include it at all. So yeah, it's just important to me to be a part of seeing that change, particularly being permanent staff as well, because I've done a lot of teaching in different higher education institutions, but it's often been the fun thing that you do for a few weeks and not really regarded as serious practice. So I think being permanent also is something that's really important to me. Teaching street dance and hip hop related dance forms here, aware that there are students actually that have had experience in it, but there are also a lot that haven't. So I generally tend to start from the beginning, from the basics, and I'm quite a reactive teacher in a sense that I kind of see what's going on in the classroom and we might accelerate through it a little bit quicker or we might slow down. It depends on kind of what's happening in the room. Another thing that I find really important is talking about the context of hip-hop related dance forms and street dance, particularly in academia as well, as it's been historically excluded from the canon, and kind of what that means and how to use these dance forms respectfully. Particularly, me teaching here doesn't mean that people have to become street dancers or hip-hop dancers. Some might do, and that's great, but also some may just be influenced by those styles and also by lots of other things that they learn. So it's about also understanding the context in terms of those dances having been excluded and then using them in a context of dance where it's been included in the canon, and kind of what that means in being respectful and open about what your influences are. So my experience working in film, theatre and television has definitely taught me that collaboration is really important. Because when you're working on projects like that, you're working with a lot of different people who do a lot of different things, and everybody has to talk together and know what's happening and know what time everything needs to happen. So if anything, it's collaboration or collaborative skills, which actually one of the first projects I worked on coming here was collaborations. And so I was able to draw a bit from those experiences to kind of help the students understand, I guess, some of the logistical things in collaboration. So I think collaboration and just understanding those logistics have been things that I've seen in my experience that are useful for the students. So I think whatever they do, whatever they work in, even if they're not physically dancing in this industry, collaboration is going to be something really important. So working on larger scale projects like dance captain for the London 2012 opening ceremony has definitely informed me with a lot of collaborative skills that were useful to pass on to the students in collaborations also, because you're working with a lot of different people. It's a huge team. Also, I think In terms of being descriptive about movement, that's another skill I kind of refined on that job, which I think is useful for the students in terms of documenting what they're doing, for example, like in detail, which they do have to do in some assessments. So I think that's been quite useful. For me, it came in the form of, with the Olympics, it was 1,500 dancers and they initially were in groups of 300. And so the front lines were always rotating. So you'd always have 4 lines at the front that would over time go to the back, and then everyone would shuffle forward, so everybody had a chance to be at the front. But at any moment you were teaching, there were always people who couldn't see because there were always people at the back. And I found that I had to be really, really descriptive with everything I was doing in terms of the movement to make sure that people at the back weren't getting lost. So I feel like I really refined the way that I was being descriptive about movement, and I found that really helpful to pass on to the students. Also, to jump a little bit back to kind of collaboration as well, actually, I also worked on the Russian Paralympic closing ceremony, and there was actually a moment where there was a painting that they needed a bird's eye shot of, but a trapdoor also opened at the exact time they needed the shot, and it could only open at a certain time because the dancers were there. So there was a big meeting that was like 3 hours long that was literally about how to make this work, which meant we had to speak to health and safety, we had to know about the trapdoor, we had to know about the people who needed the shot, we had to know about music and timing, and all of these people had to come together to kind of work it out. So yeah, definitely in terms of collaboration, that was something that was kind of tricky because it took so many elements and things to pull together to make that small moment that was about 3 seconds long work. One of the things I'm learning here is a little bit about other practices. I do know a little bit, but it's been really useful to observe some other people's classes. And I'm still doing that. I haven't gotten around to everyone, but I'm intending to see some more, because I think it's really important to look at some parallels we might have in the things that we teach and some differences. I think there are some things we can share or use as teachers across the board. Also, I think it's just really important to see what else the students are learning and how that might be helpful maybe for something I'm teaching, or maybe we can draw a parallel or a difference between something else they're learning. So yeah, I feel like I'm just learning a lot about other dance practices that I maybe have blind spots in. Street dance and hip hop related dance forms resonate with me, firstly probably because of identity. Not that you have to be a particular identity for it to resonate with you, but a lot of street dance and hip hop related dance forms stem from the music. The music changes, the dance changes, or the dance develops, which I suppose firstly is from a lot of funk music. I suppose if you look at the trajectory or the chronological order of music from funk through to hip hop, I suppose also in the UK you have grime and stuff as well. But as the music has changed, the dances have changed with it, and so I think a lot of the music that I've listened to has been from Black or African American culture. Again, people of all identities listen to that, so I suppose anyone can feel that it resonates in that way because we all have access to music. But I feel like that music being popular in a particular community and being tied so tightly to the dance has probably what's given me that quite close relationship with it and made me feel that it really resonates.